When it comes to horse racing, you can never have too much information. With Twin Spires, you can place your bets with confidence. Whether you use handicapping insights like our Brisnet speed ratings, prime power and past performances, the guidance of our experts' top picks, or just choose a name that catches your eye. Yes! No matter how you pick your horse, bet with Twin Spires. And now you can race to victory with Twin Spires tournaments.
We're back with the Twin Spires Racing Roundtable. I'm Ashley Anderson here with Vance Hansen, and we've got Nick Tamro back filling in for James Scully today. Always good to have you here, Nick.
Thrilled to be here, ready to recap a little bit and look forward.
And we'll be talking the Jim Dandy today. We'll look at the Chosen Vron's chances in the Breeders' Cup Sprint. What else caught our eye from the weekend? And before I start off, I wanted to mention, you saw in that commercial, our Twin Spires tournaments. It's a new feature we have at twinspires.com. It's a weekly live money handicapping contest. And on July 31st, tomorrow, we have a $100 Presque Isle Downs Challenge, a cash prize available with that tournament. And on Saturday, it's a $750 Ellis Park qualifier with NHC seats and cash up for grabs as well. So head to twinspires.com tournaments tab to learn more and how to register for these tournaments. But let's start things off with the Jim Dandy for the roundtable today. And Nick, I'll start with you. Let's talk about the takeaways from that race. Fierceness rebounded and beat Sierra Leone by a length. So what were your thoughts on that race?
Yeah, look, it was great to have him back, period. It was even better to have him back at what looked like the level that we'd grown accustomed to seeing him. And, we just saw in the replay, I think the single most important thing about the first half of this race, which was that he bounced right out of the gate. And one thing about Fierceness is that he shows his hand very early. It's pretty clear at this point when he has broken well, he has run very well. And when he has not broken well, he has not run well. And that includes the Kentucky Derby. It includes the Holy Bull, where he had some issues coming out of the gate, but he popped right out of there on Saturday, got himself to a contending position very quickly, and was stalking Pony Express very intently going into the backstretch. I'd say the pace was probably a little faster than par. I don't want to go out on a limb and say it was necessarily fast. I don't really think it was slow. I think it was probably on the quicker side of average. And, the interesting thing about the way this race shaped up on paper was that it kind of looked like Sierra Leone and 5 speed horses. And what ended up playing out was that Pony Express went, Fierceness stalked, Batten down stalked, and Seize the Grey didn't show the speed that he had in prior starts, including the Preakness. I think that put Fierceness in a really advantageous position stalking, but you see here, and I'm I guess just going to talk my way through the entire replay just about, but he pounces on the lead around the turn. Sierra Leone is at a huge disadvantage at this point. I mean, he's a solid 8 or 9 lengths off the pace, which obviously is going to be the case more often than not, given his running style. But it's this move coming up that you have to love from John Velasquez. He knows that Sierra Leone is going to be coming from behind him and is going to try and go outside. So he moves Fierceness off the rail, looks under his left shoulder, sees that he's now going to be forced to rally inside. And I think that was really the decisive move for the final quarter mile, because Sierra Leone ends up going down to the rail, which was a little bit heavier on Saturday than we'd seen it in prior days when there was a bit of an edge to being inside. Fierceness has more than enough to hold him off. Looks like he's even getting away from him a little bit at the end. This was a really terrific performance. It ended up being, speed figure-wise, one of his best to date, and really showed that he's back now in fine form and certainly among the leaders in what is still a very wide-open 3-year-old division.
What do you think, Vance?
Yeah, I can't disagree with any of that analysis Nick just mentioned. I will address the 3-year-old championship picture. I don't think it was clarified very much, only because the connections of Fierceness are kind of hesitating about committing themselves to running this horse back in the Travers next month, which would be a showdown between him and Division Pro Tem leader Dornick. That kind of suggests it's either not much of a priority to them necessarily, or they think it might not be worth the risk given his in and out form pattern. I suppose if it is indeed true that if Fierceness needs a large swath of time between starts to be at his most effective, then perhaps it makes more sense to put all their eggs in the Breeders' Cup Classic basket rather than in the Travers. I thought Sierra Leone ran a solid race, and he should find the extra furlong of the Travers even more to his liking. He has now lost 3 races in a row, though, including 2 as the post-time favorite. He kind of needs to start winning again, and he can't entirely depend on the grace of Eclipse Award voters. Uh, no matter how many times he might actually finish ahead of Dornoch, he will go into the Travers still with a 2-1 head-to-head advantage over Dornoch this year. But like I said, he does need to start winning again. Dornoch has won 2 in a row now, and a lot is going to be on the line in the Travers next month.
I'm kind of wondering, do they change anything with Sierra Leone? Because we've seen him start so far back and he rallies so late. He had a 117 late pace rating in this particular race, but he just always comes up short in these last 3. So do you think they need to change anything tactically? I'm curious, either of you think that? Or is it just the distance factor?
I mean, I think you kind of have to what do they say, dance with the girl you brought, right? His style is to lay way back, right? He has no
Yeah.
speed, and he is the epitome of why having that running style on dirt is so difficult. It's so difficult to be a top level horse when you give yourself just a huge deficit race in and race out. Now the good thing he has going for him, and I can't speak to all the machinations with the bit and the stuff like that. That's just out of my knowledge base, but uh, virtually half the horses that are committed to the Travers right now are speed horses. So, I mean, he stands to get a very strong pace to run at. He also feels like a horse who probably will be a little bit better at 1.25 miles than 1.125 miles because he really does, when he gets his engine going, he does really get moving. But, Vance is right. It's put up or shut up time, right? We've seen all the sizzle with Sierra Leone. It's time for some steak, right? We've gotten kind of teased these last few races, and he really does need to step forward. Now, the good thing for him is that he is one of probably conservatively 4 horses that if they were to win the Travers, they would then become the Eclipse Award favorite. I'm assuming Fierceness is going to run. I think Mike Rapoli wants to be asked whether Fierceness is running for the next month. That's why he won't commit him, because he won't get asked if they commit him, right? And he loves the attention. So you're in kind of a catch-22 with Fierceness. If you don't run there, you're either running the risk of going to the Breeders' Cup off a 14-week layoff, or you're running him closer to the Breeders' Cup, and then you're sort of violating your own rule about him not running back that quickly on short rest. So assuming Fierceness goes, Fierceness, Dornoch, Sierra Leone, those are all horses that if they were to win the Travers would clearly become the leader in the clubhouse for the 3-year-old division. An outsider could jump up. It could happen. We'll probably see horses like Parenting and Unmatched Wisdom get an opportunity stepping up in class, but it really does shape up as a fascinating race, and one in which Sierra Leone could, and I say could very cautiously, get the pace set up that he really needs.
One other thing I wanted to note about Fierceness, we saw him have a little bit more pressure in the stretch run, and he hadn't really faced that in his prior wins. He had won by a combined 31 lengths before his 1 length win in the Jim Dandy. So it was good to see that, and maybe that bodes well for some development and maturity later in the season. So if he were to run back in the Travers, do we see him improve? Or at least when he runs in the Classic, do we feel good about that? Potentially just seeing him show some poise in that stretch run, having, Batten Down coming up there and Sierra Leone late as well. Well, let's
Yeah.
move over to, oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Let's move over to the West Coast. The Chosen Vron won his 6th straight in the Bing Crosby, defended his title as well. So is he the horse to beat in the Breeders' Cup Sprint, which will be at Del Mar, where he just got this win? I'll start with Vance.
Well, he's far and away California's leading representative for the sprint, but the division out there kind of lacks much in the way of depth. And it's also worth pointing out that he did kind of have a home court advantage there last year, and it did him little good. I mean, he was a well beaten 5th in the sprint last year. Now, in his favor, there are no Eastern talents on par with the likes of Elite Power and Gunite, who ran 1-2 in the sprint at Santa Anita last year. And there could be someone younger than the Chosen Vron, a bubbling talent who could certainly emerge in the coming months. So the Chosen Vron, definitely a win machine, and horses like that are undoubtedly neat horses to follow throughout their careers. But he hasn't quite been battle tested, I don't think, just being kind of a provincial player in California for the most part. And we've seen those kind of horses fall short at miserly odds in the Breeders' Cup in the past. And one notable example I would bring up is Lost in the Fog, who in the 2005 Breeders' Cup Sprint was a heavy favorite. He hadn't really ventured out of the age-restricted ranks until that day, and he was ultimately overwhelmed. So the Chosen Vron, bottom line, definite contender for the sprint, not a standout in the division going forward.
Nick, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree with those sentiments almost completely. He's an easy horse to root for, no doubt about it. He's a lot of fun. Um, it's probably a good year to be a mid to upper level participant in this division because, as Vance said, I mean, there's no elite power, there's no gunite, there's no Jackie's Warrior, even though he failed in the Breeders' Cup a couple of times. There's just no standout. You wonder a little bit, especially seeing the Vanderbilt on Saturday and Nakatomi beating Skelly and running, a modest speed figure, I would say. You wonder if maybe the 3-year-olds are where we should be looking in this division, and we should be considering horses like Bookham Dano. There's probably one variable out there looking at the whole sprint picture, and that's that Speedboat Beach came back and posted his first workout last week. I don't know where that puts him schedule-wise for a race like the Breeders' Cup, but his conditioner has certainly found a way to get a horse ready off of one prep. So I think you could see him making noise again. But, what we know is the Chosen Vron is better than just a great Cal bred. He's a fun horse that really walloped this field. And I don't like using for comparative purposes this type of a viewpoint on things, but Close the Game Sugar had run 2 very good races in a row at Churchill, and the Chosen Vron handled them very easily. Now, Close the Game Sugar was playing a road game going out west, and the Chosen Vron's obviously at home, but as Vance said, he's going to have that same advantage in November. So he's a really interesting horse, and he's a lot of fun. I hope they run him again, at least for the Breeders' Cup. I know there was a little uncertainty about that, but he did what he was supposed to do, and probably a little bit more impressively than I thought he was going to be capable of, especially because his last race was just a little bit ho-hum. We may have just lost Ashley Vance, so you and I will pick up here. She's having some internet issues over in Louisville. So, with horses like, and I don't know if this was really going to necessarily be a big part of our conversation, but with the division being so wide open, we didn't plan on talking about the Vanderbilt, but obviously if a horse like Skelly had been an impressive winner as he was expected to be, given his short price, I think this conversation is a little bit different, to say the least, right?
Yeah, and after 2 consecutive losses, I mean, Skelly, in my mind, I was wondering going into the season whether he might turn out to be another Matoli type horse. But after 2 setbacks, one in the Aristides at Churchill and now one in the Vanderbilt at Saratoga, I don't think those comparisons quite fly anymore. I think this horse still has a lot of potential yet. To make an impact at the graded stakes level, but he hasn't quite done that yet. And so far, he's had a little bit of a difficulty showing his true talents outside of Oaklawn Park and in the wintertime and in the spring. So yeah, Skelly, somewhat of a disappointment in the Vanderbilt that he wasn't able to put that field away totally. Nakatomi, that was his first stakes win of any kind going back about 3 years. But he also ran a pretty good race in the Breeders' Cup Sprint last year, losing only by 2 lengths to Leaf Power. So Nakatomi is a horse definitely to consider, but he's definitely not a consistent visitor to the winner's circle at that level.
Usually a horse that has the brilliant speed of Skelly's generally has an edge right from the start, in that those horses usually break quickly. He seems to have a heap of gait issues. Now, he didn't break nearly as poorly on in prior starts, including the Aristides, but he definitely wasn't out as quickly as you would kind of want him to be in order to really strut his stuff. But I didn't think ultimately he had much excuse. He ran his sort of really fast middle, and then was ultimately outfinished by Nakatomi, who you said was a horse that had run some good races, but certainly was not really, in my opinion, on winning caliber up to that point. So we'll see, I guess, in the next go-round in this division. Obviously, in a race like the Forgo, and then, of course, out west, they'll have the Pat O'Brien on Pacific Classic weekend or thereabouts. Those races kind of flip-flop distance-wise, and the Forgo will go out to 7 furlongs. You can see perhaps some route horses cutting back, but I think the sprint division definitely still has a lot to be determined, including what will happen with some of the younger horses. And it looks like we've got Ashley back, and not a moment too soon. But Vance and I will say, capably filled in. We've finished out the conversation,
I could tell.
and we're
Thank
ready
you
to
very
roll.
much. I am borrowing our producer Blaze's desk because, not to name any names, but IT shut off my computer in the middle of our live stream. So yes, it is live. We'll do it live. And I feel like you all had a lot of good points about the Chosen Vron. I didn't get to hear all of them, but I trust that you covered a lot. So let's just move on to what else caught our eye from the weekend. And I'll start with you, Nick.
Yeah, so 2-year-olds, of course, are always the highlight this time of year at Del Mar and Saratoga, and who the future stars might be. And I'll admit, I try not to be too taken by some of the performances that these horses put forth. They usually end up in for a tag when I get too excited. But Chancer McPatrick, who won on Saturday at Saratoga, we're actually replay. So this was a 6.5 furlong race. And it was the first time these horses had gone beyond 6 furlongs. You're going to notice that he's the 4 in here with the green and yellow silks. He steadied a little bit in the opening 3/16 of a mile and going towards the half-mile pole. I mean, he is absolutely last in this field. He gets passed on the outside by Fiddling Felix here. And, at this point, watching the race, and I will admit I had not bet the race. I just kind of thought, I guess we'll see how good he might be next time. He's going to get prep out of this. I was keeping an eye on Invictus as well, who was the first foal to race of Serengeti Empress, multiple Grade 1 winner, and Kentucky Oaks winner. And they go around the turn. The Bill Mott trainee that was on the lead here looks to really open it up just past the quarter pole, and halfway through the stretch, looks like he's pretty much home free. Chancer McPatrick is angling out all the way to the outside here. He's got to be at least still 6 or 7 lengths back. He angles out and all of a sudden starts wearing these horses down. But what you'll notice, and to me, being somebody that likes to pay a keen eye to race flow, nobody else moved in this race. He made the only appreciable move from off the pace whatsoever. Fiddling Felix gathered some ground in the late stages, but Chancer McPatrick just goes out and wears down this leader who, granted, is exhausted, but he put forth a really nice late bid, did it on the wrong lead. This is a horse that really should gain a ton. He was the first winner by McKinsey. There then ended up being another one the following day at Del Mar, but this is a horse out of a dam side that really indicates that more distance should be on his side. Now, we saw 2-year-old fillies go 6.5 furlongs in the opener on Sunday at Saratoga, and it took him about a year to finish the race. And I bring that up because 6.5 is hard in late July, early August for these 2-year-olds, but for them to run as fast a race as they did and for him to win like that, I'm really excited about seeing what Chancer McPatrick does in a race like the Hopeful, and then on from there.
I'll say in the far turn, even if you had bet Chancer McPatrick, I would have still thought it was a loss. It was kind of
race, I would
incredible.
have given you 10 to 1, right? I would have given you at least, so maybe more.
Well, I don't have my notes since my computer has shut down, but I think I can try to do this by memory. But what stood out to me was Johannes and Silver Knot, 2 horses that are 4-year-olds in the turf male division. They both extended their win streaks to 3, and both had career best speed figures on Sunday when they won their graded stakes wins. Now, Silver Knot is a horse that I've had my eye on. He won the Elkhorn at Keeneland and beat his stablemate Bold Act for Charlie Appleby, and now has a 3-win streak with the Bowling Green, a grade 2 this Sunday at Saratoga. And Charlie Appleby, he brought a couple of runners over here, and they've been doing pretty well in the U.S., but when you look at the Breeders' Cup turf, obviously Aidan O'Brien's going to be coming over here. He has 7 wins in that race, and I think Silver Knot might give them a good competition here, but I know, Vance, you have something to say about that. Do you feel like Silver Knot can maybe contend with these top European shippers? Sorry, there's a cameo right there.
I'm a little suspect. He's been defeating some modest fields over here. I mean, granted, he's stepped up his game quite a bit, stretching out to 1.375 miles this year. He's finally kind of found his forte. He won the Elkhorn, won the Man o' War. Now he's added the Bowling Green. He was a pretty heavy favorite here on Sunday, but I'm guessing there are some other horses in the Godolphin and Appleby stable that are going to be probably tougher than he will be, and it's a very fluid situation in which Europeans are going to show up. We've got a lot of races yet to be run over there, but my gut instinct is that Silver Knot, although he could run a pretty good race in the Breeders' Cup turf, that I think he's going to find maybe another horse or two a little bit too classy.
And Vance, I think there was another European runner that caught your eye who actually will potentially be in the Breeders' Cup Turf after his win this weekend.
Yeah, the King George VI and Queen Elizabeth at Ascot on Saturday was a win and you're in for the turf. It proved to be another humbling experience for Auguste Rodin, who during the course of his career has won some of the biggest races in the world, like the Epsom Derby, the Irish Champion, and of course the Breeders' Cup Turf at Santa Anita last year. But he's run some very poor ones too, inexplicably at times, and this was yet another example of that. Going into the race, I felt he was worth fading at his short odds. I didn't ultimately bet the race because I couldn't figure out who was going to be the one to upset him. And coming up with the 25-1 French train gelding Goliath required some clever handicapping, especially after his recent loss in a modest renewal of the Hardwick Stakes at Royal Ascot. In all honesty, though, I would have been more surprised if horses like Blue Stocking and Sunway, who were shorter prices than Goliath, would have won this race. So, hats off to Goliath. Uh, Not sure what kind of Breeders' Cup Turf implications this race is going to have, even though it was a win and you're in. Auguste Rodin was already being talked about as a Japan Cup contender, skipping Breeders' Cup title defense altogether. Goliath, however, I think should probably be considered. Being a gelding, he's ineligible for races like the Prix de l'Arc de Triomphe, so it may kind of make sense for his connections to at least give the Breeders' Cup some thought. And the same stable also has another talented gelding named Calandigan, who I mentioned here last month after he destroyed his field in the King Edward VII Stakes against fellow 3-year-olds at Royal Ascot. So I think both Calandigan and Goliath here should probably be considered for the Breeders' Cup, given that the main prize in Europe is they're not eligible for it.
Any thoughts on Rebels Romance?
I think Rebels Romance, this was like his first attempt at a British Group 1 race, surprisingly. I mean, he's been winning Group 1s everywhere else around the world, the U.S. Winning the Breeders' Cup Turf a couple of years ago. He's won in Hong Kong and Germany. I thought he would have run a little bit better than this, but maybe he kind of peaked a couple of years ago. And he's another one, obviously, that they could bring over and run in the Breeders' Cup Turf again. And I think he would perform respectably, but he might be one that just might be past his prime a little bit.
All right. Nick, anything to add to that?
No, it should be fun to see. I mean, it's great to have Applebee's horses running over here so regularly, just because I mean they're feasting on these divisions that offer up big prizes, and our purse money here is large. So he's very astute doing so. He's definitely well represented in some of the stakes coming up this weekend at Saratoga again. So we've definitely not seen the last of his horses doing well stateside, whether Silver Knot is able to go on and face tougher competition or not.
All right. Well, that's all the time we have today. You've now seen our war room. You saw a cameo from Blaze. Thanks for joining us, Nick. We'll be back next Tuesday. We'll also be on the Twin Spires jury Thursday. We'll have you as well, Nick, I believe. So looking forward to that. And of course, head to twinspires.com to check out those tournaments starting tomorrow at Presque Isle and then Ellis Park on Saturday. We'll see you next time. Wow, what?
You did good.